The lives of queens are often surrounded by grandeur, power, and influence. But even the most powerful monarchs are not immune to the inevitability of death. Throughout history, queens have ruled nations, shaped cultures, and left legacies that endure today. But how did these remarkable women face their final days? From natural causes to execution, their deaths were as diverse as their reigns. In this video, we'll explore the last moments of 5 of the most famous and powerful queens in history. Number 1. Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning British monarch, passed away on September 8, 2022, at the age of 96. Her death marked the end of an era spanning over 70 years, during which she served as a symbol of stability and continuity for the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. Elizabeth had been experiencing declining health in her later years, with her public appearances becoming increasingly rare. The official cause of her death was not attributed to a specific illness, but was described as old age on her death certificate. In the months leading up to her passing, Elizabeth's mobility had become limited, and she was frequently seen using a cane. Her last public appearance was just 2 days before her death, when she appointed Liz Truss as the new Prime Minister of the UK at Balmoral Castle, her Scottish residence, rather than at Buckingham Palace. Elizabeth passed away peacefully at Balmoral, surrounded by her family. The news of her death was met with an outpouring of grief across the world. Her eldest son, Charles, immediately ascended to the throne as King Charles III. Queen Elizabeth's passing marked the end of a remarkable chapter in British history, where she oversaw the decolonization of Africa, significant political changes, and the modernization of the monarchy itself. Her funeral was a grand state event attended by leaders and dignitaries from across the globe. Number 2. Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria, who reigned for 63 years, died on January 22, 1901 at the age of 81. Her death marked the end of the Victorian era, a period of great industrial, cultural, and political change in Britain and around the world. In her later years, Victoria experienced declining health, suffering from arthritis and weakened eyesight, which limited her mobility and public appearances. In the months leading up to her death, Victoria's health worsened, and she became increasingly frail. She spent her final days at Osborne House, her residence on the Isle of Wight. Surrounded by close family members, including her son, the future King Edward VII, and her grandson, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, she slowly deteriorated. The exact cause of her death was reported as a combination of old age and a series of strokes. In her final days, Victoria was largely bedridden and unable to speak clearly. Her passing marked the end of the longest reign of any British monarch at the time, a period defined by British imperial expansion, the Industrial Revolution, and significant social reform. Victoria's death deeply affected the British public, as she had been a constant presence in the lives of her subjects. Her funeral was a grand and solemn event, with her coffin draped in white as per her instructions. The Victorian era gave way to the Edwardian period, as her son Edward VII ascended to the throne, ushering in a new era for Britain. Number 3. Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary, Queen of Scots, met a tragic end on February 8, 1587, after being executed at the age of 44. Her death was the result of years of political and religious conflict, particularly her involvement in plots against Queen Elizabeth I of England. Mary, a Catholic, had once been seen as a legitimate claimant to the English throne by Catholic factions, which made her a constant threat to Elizabeth, a Protestant. After fleeing Scotland in 1568 following a rebellion, Mary sought refuge in England, where she was imprisoned by Elizabeth for 19 years. During her captivity, Mary became the focal point of several Catholic conspiracies aimed at overthrowing Elizabeth and placing Mary on the English throne. One such plot, known as the Babington Plot, directly linked Mary to plans to assassinate Elizabeth. Although Mary denied any involvement, letters implicating her were discovered, providing enough evidence for Elizabeth's advisors to recommend her execution. Mary was tried and found guilty of treason in 1586. Despite her royal status and pleas for mercy, Elizabeth reluctantly signed the death warrant. On the morning of February 8, 1587, Mary was led to the execution block at Fotheringhay Castle. She wore a red gown symbolizing Catholic martyrdom and faced her death with great dignity. Her execution, however, was gruesome, taking 2 blows of the axe to sever her head. Mary's death ended a turbulent life marked by political intrigue, personal tragedy, and imprisonment. Her execution also heightened tensions between Catholic and Protestant factions in England and across Europe. Number 4. Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France and wife of King Louis XVI, met a tragic end during the French Revolution. Born into Austrian royalty, she became a symbol of the monarchy's excesses as the economic disparity in France widened. As public discontent grew, the revolution broke out, and the royal family was imprisoned. In 1793, after King Louis XVI had been executed, Marie Antoinette faced trial. She was charged with high treason, depleting the national treasury, and conspiring against the revolution. The charges were exaggerated, and her trial was more of a formality, as the revolutionaries were determined to rid France of the monarchy. Despite her dignified defense, Marie Antoinette was sentenced to death. On October 16, 1793, she was taken to the guillotine in a cart, dressed in a simple white gown. Her once lavish life had been reduced to this moment of public execution. As she was led to the scaffold, she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot and famously said, "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose." Her head was swiftly severed by the guillotine, marking the end of her reign and life at the age of 37. Marie Antoinette's death symbolized the fall of the French monarchy and served as a warning to the aristocracy across Europe. Her execution remains one of the most iconic moments of the French Revolution, cementing her place in history as a tragic and controversial figure. Number 5. Elizabeth of Russia. Elizabeth of Russia, the daughter of Peter the Great, ruled the Russian Empire from 1741 until her death in 1762. Known for her beauty and lively spirit in her youth, she was a strong and capable leader who steered Russia through several important military conflicts, including the War of Austrian Succession and the 7 Years' War. Despite her successes, Elizabeth's later years were marked by declining health. Elizabeth's death came after a long struggle with various illnesses. In the years leading up to her death, she suffered from obesity, which severely affected her health. She also experienced frequent bouts of fever and fatigue, which left her physically weak. By the end of 1761, Elizabeth was bedridden, her body worn out by years of excess and stress. She is believed to have suffered a series of strokes, which further deteriorated her condition. On January 5, 1762, Elizabeth passed away at the age of 52. Her death marked the end of a significant chapter in Russian history, as she had maintained stability in the empire and avoided harsh repressions during her reign. Elizabeth's passing paved the way for her nephew, Peter III, to ascend to the throne, which would lead to further dramatic changes in Russian leadership. And that concludes the stories of these powerful and famous queens and how they faced their final days. Their legacies continue to shape history, and their lives still fascinate us today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating historical content.